Good evening, everybody. This is the Pass Ball Show, brought to you by JohnPielli.com. Glad to be with you on the 17th day of January 2018. And listen, we got a slew of stuff that we're going to get into today. Just a reminder, if anybody wants to be part of the program, please give me a call, 732-364-3598. That's 732-364-3598. Amongst topics we're going to hit today, we're going to talk about an unfortunate, sad story in regards to the world of college football. We're going to talk about the possibility of Jenrry Mejia coming back as a relief pitcher for the New York Mets in 2018. I'm going to talk a little bit about the odds for the Super Bowl previews going past this week. Obviously, after this Sunday, we'll have 2 weeks to talk about the Super Bowl, probably talk way too much about it. And by the time the Super Bowl comes, that there's literally going to be nothing else to talk about. But I am going to spend a little time talking about the NBA today. And I do want to talk a little bit about Isiah Thomas and Paul Pierce, but also the story that's out there in regards to the Cleveland Cavaliers about anonymous players not believing in their playoff chances or their chances to win a title. So a lot of different things we're going to get into. A reminder, please comment on the thread, whether you're listening through Periscope, Facebook Live, even if it's through YouTube. Now, YouTube obviously is not going to be live, but it's, on a replayed version. But I do get all the comments, and I try the best to address every single thing that's brought up in the show at some point. So we're going to start today, and I'm trying to think of where. And I think the best place to start is in baseball. And I'm going to talk a little bit about Jenrry Mejia. Now, there's a story in Forbes that came out that basically discussed the main reasons why Jenrry Mejia, if he should apply for reinstatement, he should be back pitching for the Mets this year. And if you go back, one of the my favorite things that I like to do is go back in the history of the sport and look at similar instances. Now, of course, for those that don't know, Jenrry Mejia, Major League pitcher with the New York Mets, was suspended for the use of performance-enhancing drugs 3 times. And in the most updated agreement between the Players Association and the owners, as it's called, the Joint Drug Treatment and Prevention Program that they've set up, there was an agreement that a first-time offense for a person that fails a drug test, gets caught using performance-enhancing drugs, gets suspended for 100 games. Now, if he gets suspended again, it's an entire season. And now the third time, it doesn't have to be for the same substance, but a similarly performance-enhancing substance results in a banning for life. That player is not allowed to play baseball ever again. And a couple things stood out to me in regards to the study of this. And looking back at this Forbes article, which they did a very good job, they mentioned, first of all, the fact that we're talking about somebody's livelihood. And I think if you compared that to the average world where everybody has their job doing whatever it is that they're doing for a living, respecting the fact that somebody at some point, regardless of their profession, is doing something that's based off of a skill. It is. You can't deny that. It could be the simplest form of what you're doing for a living, but it involves some sort of skill. How can there be a mandate that says if you do something, regardless of what it is, that we found that is not criminal? And let's understand, the use of performance-enhancing drugs, yes. If it's a substance that's an illegal substance, we're talking about the criminal impact that something may have. If you have the possession of an illegal substance, then yes, you deal with the police and having it be a criminal type of situation, but the fact that you've used it is not. Now, when we're talking about performance-enhancing substances, we could go the very lowest road and say that there are a couple that are contained in the likes of a GNC or sold some way over the counter, and in some cases may not necessarily be illegal substances. Now, when you're talking about performance-enhancing substances, a lot of them are used for other purposes, whether it's a drug that helps a horse or a different type of animal. In that regard, may be legal. But according to Major League Baseball and the majority of other professional sports, drug tests exist to say that players cannot be under the influence or have these type of substances in their body. So the difference we're talking about here, we're talking about something that's against the rules as opposed to against the law. So going back to the point, can you tell somebody that is not, quote unquote, breaking the law or is doing something that by itself is a criminal offense and could lead to the result of potential jail time? And I'm talking about, obviously, I'm comparing it to a heinous crime. How about Aaron Hernandez for a second? Obviously, you understand that the fact that he went to trial and was convicted of murder meant that his professional football career was over. So are we comparing Jenrry Mejia's use of performance-enhancing drugs, which, yes, if you want to say he's cheating his contemporaries, his teammates, and his opponents, okay. But is he doing anything heinous that's going to result or should result in a prison sentence? Because if somebody is serving a sentence in prison, it's obvious they can't work and do their job. So are you going to tell a person that has the ability to make a living that they cannot make a living for themselves and they cannot do their job with the skill that requires them to do their job and make money? Have we gotten to a point where we're going to tell a Major League Baseball player that he does not have the right to make a living and support his family? In the end, it's supposed to be determined by the person's skills. And if he goes out there and he can't pitch anymore, he can't get anybody out, he's released, and can't find a job in Major League Baseball, it's one thing. But you're talking about a person that's been told, regardless of your skill, you are not allowed or you're ineligible to play in Major League Baseball. I think it's a pretty interesting discussion to have. The other aspect of it has to do with past players that have been suspended for the use of recreational drugs in the sport. We could talk about the most prominent ones, like a Darryl Strawberry or a Dwight Gooden. And obviously they had to suffer. They were suspended at different points of their career. But if you look at a Steve Howe instance, Steve Howe was cited for 7 different occasions. In other words, he failed over the course of a series of years 7 different drug tests for the use of recreational drugs, and mostly cocaine. A decision was made that Steve Howe would be suspended permanently for the sport for the use of cocaine and recreational drugs. Steve Howe, at some point, whether it's through the use of an arbiter or the discussion, maybe common sense, or everything positive prevails, Steve Howe is allowed to return to Major League Baseball after he was suspended for life. And I believe this happens after the 1987 season when he was suspended or banned for life, because he doesn't return back until the New York Yankees in 1991. So he ends up missing 3 full seasons. Now, if you're looking at the comparison, did he serve enough of a sentence per se? And going back to the point I was making, does baseball as an employer have the right to tell somebody that they don't have the right to generate an income doing something that they're skilled enough to do? Now, baseball had determined that, a series of years had gone by and was enough to allow Steve Howe to be eligible. And he ended up pitching the last 6 seasons of his career with the New York Yankees. And good thing for him, he still had something left and had a couple very good seasons, particularly in 1991 and 1994, where he kept his earned run average under 2, but for the most part was a very valuable member of the New York Yankees bullpen for the final 6 seasons of his career. So you ask yourself, what does that mean for Jenrry Mejia? Remember, we're talking about a pitcher that has had the opportunity to come up here and pitch, and at some point they're not going to have that same ability to do the same thing that they have done. Remember, his suspension for the use of performance-enhancing drug, it kind of escalated quickly. It started after he made a couple appearances in the beginning of the 2015 season, or I think it was just a one appearance, or maybe he didn't make any. I'm honestly, I don't even know. But it was very early in the 2015 season. He was suspended for, at that time, 50 games. Ends up getting the second part of the suspension, which ended up becoming 1 year. Went from 100 games to 1 year. And then before he served out that next suspension in the early part of the 2016 season, was told that he was suspended for life. So he has spent quite a bit of time and spent quite a bit of what would have been the prime of his career, or the early part of the prime of his Major League Baseball career, suspended. He has now missed 2 entire seasons. Now, if he, for whatever reason, cannot get the message by now, or manages to, for any reason, put any doubt or any suspicion that he has used performance-enhancing drugs, and he probably doesn't deserve to be back. All of this is predicated on the fact that he has understood that he's made a mistake and is remorseful. There's a difference, and here's where I'm going to draw a little bit of a line. There's a difference between somebody that decides or has decided to use performance-enhancing drugs and somebody that has an addiction to any type of narcotic. You get to a certain point and you talk about the strawberry or the Gooden situation and what they had to deal with and go through. And after a while, when they're battling against the addiction, it takes over them. So you could legitimately say that they haven't chosen to relapse or have the problems that they're having. It's the battle that they're having with the addiction. There has never been any proof that steroids or use of any sort of performance-enhancing drug is addicting. So Jenrry Mejia has to be held accountable going forward, and also has to be remorseful for what he has done. And if he is, he has the right to work. And I think because of that, in this Forbes article, which was a very, very well thought out and put together piece, explains a couple reasons, and the reasons that I just stated, that Jenrry Mejia should get another opportunity. Now, we can't just continue to do this. I mean, baseball has not designated what is a fourth-time offense, because he has got the opportunity. He's in unprecedented territory where they're talking about a rule which they said was going to be a lifetime ban. How do you say that something for a fourth-time offense, when somebody is already getting a lifetime ban, is going to be any stronger? Is it lifetime ban without the possibility of quote-unquote parole? I don't know. But I do think they have to put something in there to make sure that this guy understands that, all right, he may get the opportunity to come back, but he cannot fail another test. So that, you get to a certain point, and listen, I don't know how much you blame on him already. I mean, was it something that was cycling through his system enough? Maybe he made the mistake 3 different times, which seems the most logical of possibilities. And if he did that, he's got to be accountable for it. And whatever reason or whatever it is that was in his system that allowed him to fail 3 separate times, he may be getting the opportunity of all opportunities to fail a drug test for performance-enhancing drugs when the 3rd time offense is a lifetime ban, to fail 3 times and still have the opportunity to play Major League Baseball. Interesting to see how it turns out. I do want to spend a little bit of time, and we'll talk about a couple other topics in a little bit, but I want to talk right now about the Super Bowl previews. And I know we're a little bit early. We still have the games coming on Sunday. We got, of course, the Jacksonville Jaguars going to New England. We got the Philadelphia Eagles going to Minnesota. And already they're starting to talk about what would be the Super Bowl odds. And the fact that the Minnesota Vikings, if they win this week, will be the first team to ever host the Super Bowl. It'll be something that we haven't seen before. Odds makers put them in favor if they're playing the Jacksonville Jaguars, and they have the odds right now at 5.5 with Minnesota hosting the Super Bowl against Jacksonville. And if the Vikings happen to host the New England Patriots, the Patriots would be favored by 3 because it would be a road game. The Patriots, in all odds, have the best opportunity to win the Super Bowl right now. So if it went the other way and the Eagles won, the Patriots would be favored by 7 against the Eagles. And if the most unlikeliest of Super Bowl scenarios happens, the Jacksonville Jaguars would be favored over the Philadelphia Eagles, even though the Eagles currently sit as the number 1 seed in the National Football Conference and finished with a 13-3 record, and the Jaguars finished with the number 3 seed and a 10-6 record in a regular season in the AFC. Obviously, all has to do with the fact that Carson Wentz isn't available. But, man, I'll tell you, you look at Nick Foles, and here's what I'm going to look at, because I'm obviously a lot more intrigued by the Eagles-Vikings game rather than the game between the Patriots and the Jaguars, because I think you're looking at a situation where the Jaguars have a very good defense, but the Patriots look like they are that much better. And, you know, you're looking at the odds. Patriots are favored by 9 at home. It's a tall order for the Jaguars. And listen, anything can happen. The Jacksonville impressed last week. They came out there and they scored a lot of points. They managed to move the ball very well against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Their defense, which has been given a lot of credit, especially in the second half of the game, didn't seem like it was able to stop the Pittsburgh Steelers. So I have certainly some doubts. Obviously, anything can happen. I know Jacksonville had beaten Pittsburgh during the regular season. You know, it's just going to be a tall order to expect the Jaguars to win this game. But going back to the point I was making about Nick Foles. Nick Foles, if he's in a Super Bowl as a quarterback, it will be because he played well enough against the Atlanta Falcons. He's going to have to play even a little bit better this week against Case Keenum and the Minnesota Vikings, even though the game's at home. I think you give the Eagles a little bit of a home field advantage, but the Vikings, because of the Carson Wentz factor, are favored by 3. So Philadelphia is the underdog at home once again. But I'm looking at it and I'm imagining the possibility of a Jaguars-Eagles Super Bowl, which, by the way, from the network standpoint, what's it, ABC? Or no, NBC, I'm sorry. They're hosting a Super Bowl this year, or, they're in the game on their network. Would not be as excited about it. I understand the Super Bowl is a holiday by itself, and it really doesn't matter to some people who's playing. people get together and understand, hey, this is going to be our football party. We're going to get people together, and it really doesn't matter who's playing. Half the people there have no idea what's going on and end up, some of them ask for information and learn a little bit. Others do not, and they just simply don't care. But from a rating standpoint, your best chance of getting ratings is going to be Minnesota hosting the game, and it's going to be New England because of their national following. Now, New England didn't always have a national following, but you know what happens when you are a perennial playoff team and Super Bowl winner year in and year out for 18 years, you win 5 Super Bowls. Yeah, all of a sudden a fan base is going to build, and a fan base is not going to be as much local as it is national. That's what happens when you win. That's why there's New York Yankees fans all over the country. That's why there's Pittsburgh Steelers and Dallas Cowboy fans throughout the entire country. That's why, even though it doesn't get a lot of attention, there are Boston Celtics basketball fans throughout the country. So New England, Minnesota is best for ratings. But what happens if it is a Jacksonville, Philadelphia? Obviously, on a local front, Eagles fans would be very happy. They'd be excited. Another Super Bowl and certainly a chance to win a Super Bowl. What would you expect? I mean, it's amazing at this point, and I think the week will have to play out. Give me an idea before we talk about the actual odds to the Super Bowl. How did the teams get there? Did the Eagles impress against the Minnesota Vikings? Did their offense show up under Nick Foles? Because I think that would impact the odds, certainly. But, we certainly have we have 5 days to go or 4 days to go or, whatever to find out who's going to be playing in this upcoming Super Bowl. But it's going to be hard to expect anything less than a New England Vikings Super Bowl. But if you look back at what happened last week, the Vikings may really have had no business winning the game that they won. So if that's the case, does that bode better for the Eagles, who won? They beat the Atlanta Falcons, but it wasn't like they were necessarily the dominant team. They won a game 15-10. Their defense showed up. I think Nick Foles was able to make some plays, but he's got to open up the offense and maybe go downfield a little more if they're going to have the opportunity to beat the Vikings, which, by the way, have a much better defense than what they saw against Atlanta. Have a defense that certainly is as good as the Philadelphia Eagles, if not, maybe a little bit better. But moving on, once again, this is John Pielli, Pass Ball Show. A reminder, phone number if you want to call in is 732-364-3598. That's 732-364-3598. Next topic I want to hit up is an unfortunate story, a tragic story, a sad situation as we are talking about the sudden death of the quarterback for the Washington State team. And, it looks as if Tyler Helinski, who was age 21, ends up committing suicide with a shotgun bullet to his head. He left a suicide note. And to me, I look at this, and, this is a situation where I talk about the sadness of what ends up happening. And I'll tell you, I'm ready to punch CBS Sports in the mouth. I wish they'd have a website that wouldn't hit you with these stupid pop-ups of these random jerks that are just yapping about every single story. I want to read a story. And I, you know what? I don't mean to change the subject, but I want to throw this out there to the people that are listening. If you're trying to look for information, in other words, if you want to learn a little bit about a story that's going on in the world of sports, would you rather some random voice tell it to you? Or would you like to, in some cases, actually read the details yourself? To me, it's a pretty. It's a no question situation. I would rather read it. Especially when we're talking about people that are probably making, I don't know, $10, $12 an hour to sit there in a suit and yap about a stupid story. I'd rather yap about it myself than have to listen to somebody tell a story. But I digress. sad story. The quarterback for the Washington State team, Tyler Hilinski, ends up committing suicide. And this is obviously, as we go through the course of the week and more details emerge about exactly what happened, we're going to find out why a 21-year-old who is expected to once again be the starting quarterback at a pretty prominent college football team decides to take his own life. You could think of right off the bat many different things that would happen to it, or happen to deserve, to cause somebody to do something such as that. There's, could be a girl maybe, could be a drug problem. And I'm saying all this stuff is possibilities if you're a law enforcement officer and you want to figure out what happened. Obviously, you have to assume anything being possible. But I think it's a very sad situation when you think about somebody that is right in the prime or right in the middle of their college football career, getting ready for another season to be the starting quarterback at Washington State. I'm going to throw another possibility in there, and of course we can only speculate at this point until there's any more details that become available. But you look at the issue with CTE in sports, and I know I was talking about kind of playing devil's advocate about a possibility of a story of a person, a baseball player who ended up becoming the manager, was named the manager of the Detroit Tigers for the 19-3 season, ended up committing suicide in the off season. And he obviously had a lot to live for. There was other possibilities, and this was another well-written story that if you want to check it out. The pitcher's name was Win Mercer, and he was a pitcher that was active but also got named the manager of the Detroit Tigers. And there's many scenarios and possibilities of different things that could have happened, whether he was holding on to money for a barnstorming team and had issues with gamblers, had issues with women. So many different things could happen, and those things, of course, have to come to the forefront in a situation where a man chooses to take his own life. But now, we're talking about a younger player, a younger man, who still has the rest of his college career left, has the opportunity to be the starting quarterback of his 1A college that he's going to, Washington State. Was it a girl? Could it have been something related to money? Something maybe he was embarrassed that he had to reveal that he wasn't comfortable doing? These are all details that will come out at some point, but I made a possibility, and I threw it out there, and obviously there's a lot of facts that are involved in the Win Mercer case that are very different to the Hilinski case. But I mentioned CTE. You're talking about baseball played at that time, which was a little more reckless. There was certainly a lot more contact. There was no protective equipment. Catching equipment had just started. So you're talking about a guy that's coming to plate with no helmet, contact that's made on the bases that was completely reckless, and maybe he had a head injury, and the headaches that he was dealing with and the post-concussion syndrome that he was dealing with became a little bit too much. Odds are, in the Win Mercer case, as we hit the halfway point here in the Pass Ball Show, once again, this is John Pielli. The number to be reached here, if you want to be part of the program, is 732-364-3598. And I tell you, if you were watching my reaction there, that is the sip of a coffee that you thought was at least lukewarm that went cold within the last 20 minutes. And I'm sure we've all been there before. But moving on, talking about Win Mercer, pitcher for the Detroit Tigers, was part of the National League with the Washington franchise up until 1899 when the team was let go and contracted. Gets a chance to be the manager of the Detroit Tigers for the 19-3 season while he was still an active pitcher, and just out of the blue commits suicide. Lets an exhaust pipe in his hotel room, hooks it up to himself, and asphyxiates himself. Obviously, you're looking at a situation that's different. We're talking about a college football quarterback that ends up putting a shotgun to his head and pulling the trigger. And we hope at the very least that we don't find out we don't find out that it's murder, if it is what it is, or it is what it's been reported. It's very sad in its own right, and I get it. But as we continue to move on and figure out what exactly is it that would cause a 21-year-old college student who was the starting quarterback of his football team to commit suicide by pulling the trigger of a shotgun to his head, I think of CTE. And it's been very prominent in the NFL, but it doesn't get enough play in regards to college football. And obviously, we're talking about possibilities here. We still have a lot of information that's going to be released. He did leave a suicide note, and I don't know if that suicide note will forever become public. And if it does, it should be at the consent of the young man and his family. If they decide that they don't want that to be public, it doesn't have to be. And we'll talk a little bit about the media in a little bit. I do want to make sure we understand. I got a gripe with the media today. So you have a person that ends up, pulling the trigger, ending his own life. Was it CTE related? And I think until the details of exactly what happened and led to it come out, if they ever do, we could talk about CTE in regards to college sports. Now, I understand the college football game is not, in some cases, played at the pace of the National Football League. And it isn't, because if we watch the pace of play, the strength of the players from your offensive linemen to your receivers and the skills that exist on your average National Football League game as opposed to a college football game, there is a distinct difference. There's a distinct advantage that a player that is playing in a National Football League has over that of your average college football player. But we're talking about contact that is had at a significant pace, at a significant rate of speed. And in some cases, whether it's intentional or unintentional, it happens in a reckless way. Bodies flying in the air have just as much of a chance of making contact with each other at a very uncomfortable pace or uncomfortable rate, which results in injuries. Eric LeGrand from Rutgers ends up being paralyzed for the rest of his life. I'd hate to sell him and his family the story of the violence in the National Football League being that much worse to college football, because he's going to have a hard time understanding that. His family's going to have a hard time accepting that. College football is just as dangerous. And my question that obviously we're not going to have an answer until any details, if they ever do become available, did CTE have something to do with this young man taking his own life? Obviously, respect is put out to his family at this time, a very tough time. Prayers go out there, and hope the man gets the opportunity to rest in peace and his memories live on. A very sad, sad story. A young man ends up committing suicide, which seems to have a lot to live for. And Tyler Helinski passing away at the age of 21, a very sad story. But moving on, I did want to talk a little NBA today, and we haven't talked a lot of basketball on this program. We will work in some guests as we move on. I got to be honest, whether I have a guest or not, it's not that much of an issue. When we did the Pass Ball show years ago, it was so centric or set around the guest. And, I would rather be providing as much of the content as I can. So we will have guests, I do promise you, and Nick Lowry will be joining the program, former NFL kicker for the Chiefs and the New York Jets. He will be joining the program tomorrow. But, the urgency in regards to making sure every show has a guest, to me, it's going to have to do with the amount of content that I have. So 2 more points we want to get into today. Isiah Thomas and Paul Pierce, the little bit of the, who is more selfish in regards to something that was supposed to be done with respect meant for the Boston Celtics. The one entity in this whole thing that's actually trying to do their job and trying to be respectful and trying to do something very nice for 2 of its former players is the Boston Celtics. What are they doing in this situation that is wrong? Nothing. They want to try to put together a video tribute of a player in Isiah Thomas, who, by the way, was not there very long. It's not like Bill Russell is coming back home. It's not like Larry Bird is coming back home. We're not talking about somebody at this point of their NBA career is on a path for the Hall of Fame. But the Celtics, with respect to a player that had an impact in a city, obviously had some major personal issues and hurdles to overcome during his brief career with the Boston Celtics. And the Celtics want to just give the guy some respect, give him a little video tribute in front of his fans. And right off the bat, he says, well, I don't want to do it on a night where I'm not playing. Which he wasn't. He was still hurt. So now it's set up, and I believe it's the 11th of February, that the game is going to be played, the next game between the Celtics and the Cleveland Cavaliers, which, by the way, we will talk about the Cavs in a second. The Cavs could very well be, on their way to playing out the string of their season at the pace that they're playing at right now. But like I said, we're going to save that for a couple more minutes. Isiah Thomas decides that he wants to be on the court. He wants to be playing when they play the video tribute. And once again, the Boston Celtics do the right thing and say it's going to be okay. So now you got Paul Pierce getting involved. Paul Pierce saying on the 11th of February, that's my night. My night where my banner goes up, my number gets retired. It's about me. So why do I want to share the spotlight with somebody that only played a couple seasons with the Boston Celtics? There's nothing good that's going to come out of that. Isiah Thomas says today, you know what? Forget the video tribute. I don't want to have the video tribute. You know what? You want it to be about Paul Pierce. He actually is the one out of the 2 that takes the high road. Paul Pierce needs to take a little bit of slack for this. You're talking about a video tribute that's only going to last a couple minutes. Can't possibly last that long. And they're going to use the selfishness over his number 34 going up in the rafters and being retired, which, by the way, he's going to be remembered in a lore of the fans of the Boston Celtics forever. And a lot longer than the Celtic fans are ever going to remember Isiah Thomas. So Paul Pierce uses his whatever bullying tactic. Maybe it was mind games. Maybe it was the Jedi mind trick that he used with Isiah Thomas to essentially bully him into saying, you know what, it doesn't matter. I don't want a video tribute anyway. So a guy that the Boston Celtics were going to honor, you essentially bullied him into deciding that he didn't want to be honored because it was going to be the same day of Paul Pierce night. So Paul Pierce, when he wants to be remembered in regards to the best Celtics of all time, he wants to be remembered with the likes of a Bill Russell, with the likes of a Larry Bird and Kevin McHale, and going back in the history of the all-time Boston Celtics. You know what you're going to add in there? And he's a bully. And he uses the media in his own mind trick to bully a player which the Boston Celtics were looking to honor. This isn't a matter of comparing who was better, Paul Pierce or Isiah Thomas. Because that's not even a discussion. It's not even part of the reason that we would even have to talk about it. Now, Isiah Thomas could have just had his video tribute play during the time that he wasn't playing against the team as a member of the Cleveland Cavaliers, still coming back from his injury. He wasn't dressed. Or he had just played a couple games and was going to sit out that game in regards to rest. He could have been man enough and said, just let the video tribute play. So he screwed up a little bit too. But now you essentially have Paul Pierce using the tactic of being a bully. It doesn't mean he is a bully, but in this particular situation, he is being a bully. He bullied Isiah Thomas into saying, you know what, I don't want the video tribute. Have a nice night, Paul Pierce. So, that's the way it is. Paul Pierce, if he wants to be remembered in the likes of the greatest Celtics of all time, he's going to have a hard time being remembered for that. Number one, because he wasn't as good. You know, he wasn't as good as Bill Russell. He wasn't as good as Larry Bird. But I tell you, he doesn't win the popularity contest and again, in regards to what he chooses to do in this situation. Moving on, finally, the one point that I wanted to get into today was a story that we hear about the Cleveland Cavaliers. And this is a report. And I always put in quotations when I hear report. Because when you have to use that word as a reporter, that means you're either trying to hide your sources or what you're throwing out there is completely speculation. So this report says, prominent Cavs players questioning if they have what it takes to win an NBA title. You know what would have been a better story? This player or that player, throw their name in it. Because what this report is saying, it's saying one of two things. And I'm going to call the reporter's name out in a second. And I don't think he's necessarily doing something that's devious. He's doing something that unfortunately is becoming too common in the world of reporting today, particularly sports reporting. But if we talk about mainstream news media, we have this thing hovering over our heads about stories that are not cited very well and are not real, that are being reported as facts. So I continue to feel that sports reporting is getting watered down a little bit, and it's getting to the level that the national reporting is. How do you have two sides of one story written out, completely contradicting each other? But that's for another day. So the Cavs, apparently there are players on the Cleveland Cavaliers that are telling this reporter, Chris Barnewall, from CBS Sports, and I just want to make sure that I got this story correct. They're using the term multiple sources. So it isn't just Chris Barnewall, but there are other reporters that are deciding that this is something that these players are saying. Now, do you think it's LeBron James that's saying this? No, but whatever players it is, it could be LeBron James. They were cornered, whether it's in the locker room, whether it was on their own, whether it was over the phone. They were pulled by these reporters that thought that they were actually writing a story. And asked, are you questioning if you have what it takes to win an NBA title? And anybody within their right mind, if you're an active player on that roster and you're getting paid by the organization, even if you believed it in your heart of hearts that you didn't have what it takes to win an NBA title, you would never put your name behind it. So now you have a shady way of reporting that's accepted. It's accepted by you, the viewer, or you, the listener, or you, the reader. And the rest of the media says it's okay to report like this. Because it's all about, right, the clicks on the website, the selling in the newspapers. Who cares if you even have enough facts? But if you as a reporter can get somebody off the record under the condition of being anonymous, and they can say whatever it is that they want to say, and you report it and say several prominent players. So that means that the number 12, 13, 14, and 15 players on the Cleveland Cavaliers, the last guys on the bench, assuming that they are healthy, your healthy scratches every day, did not question whether the Cleveland Cavaliers have the ability to win an NBA title. But more than one, and probably more than 2 because the word several was used. Several prominent players speaking on condition of anonymity, which is a word that I don't think I'll ever be able to say. According to ESPN, Cleveland.com, and The Athletic, expressed doubt that the problems, an aging roster, defensively challenged personnel, and a glut of redundant role players could simply be worked out through patience and a chance to cohese when fully healthy. Listen, I understand reporters want to write stories and they have a job to continue to throw print out there. There's some things that I believe from a respect standpoint, from a professional standpoint, should be out of bounds, should not be reported. If somebody is willing to put their name behind it, if there is a player in the Cleveland Cavaliers locker room, whether it's J.R. Smith, whether it is LeBron James, whether it's Kevin Love, whether it is anybody that wants to put their name behind it, if I'm the media, I swarm to it and I report that story. But if there's somebody in doubt and has to be pressed to say, hey, tell me how you really feel, I won't put my name behind it, it's not professionalism. And the other side of it, I'm going to talk about it from the player's standpoint. When you have players that feel in their own mind that they can say something and hide behind what they just said because they're a coward, that person wouldn't play on my team. And that person at some point should allow, even if it's from a karma standpoint, their name get put behind something that it is that they said. 2 things could have happened here. And I'm believing in the reporter reporting what they're trying to get at. If they're asking these questions, I think it's wrong. I don't think they should be asking these kind of questions. But they're reporting that they got the answer that they got. As I said, several prominent players. So they were on a goose chase and they got some players to take the bait. Now, if the players are saying, listen, I could say whatever it is that I want to say, and I could get some reporter to not put my name to it, I could hide behind it like the coward that I am. How would I trust that person, number 1, in my own locker room? How would I trust that person, number 2, if I'm paying them? What does that say about somebody's character that's willing to do that? And I'm not going to say that the Cleveland Cavaliers should cut everybody. But I will tell you, when somebody goes out of their way, which very well could have happened here, somebody deciding, and if it's several prominent players, it's more than 2 or more than 3, however many it is, they decide that it's okay to say this. And if they're saying it within a group, that's one thing. Because that's an indictment on the entire team. But if they're saying it individually, either deciding that if they take their name away from it, they could say whatever they want, or just taking the bait of the media that wants to make a point, I honestly don't know what to say. If players do that, if they have this entitlement to feel like they could say whatever they want to the media, and they don't have to put their name behind it, I want to get that take. I want to talk to more players about that. And I want to get somebody to actually say that they feel like they could go out there and say whatever it is that they want, but they could hide behind the fact that they said it. Because that's not professional from their standpoint. They're reporting disputed news at the very least. It could be fake news. We don't know. I want to know a name. This story doesn't have legs unless it has a name behind it, which is the part of it that's bothering me the most. Because if the Cleveland Cavaliers locker room has quit, that is a story. And I'll tell you, here's my message to the Cleveland Cavaliers. If any of you, and according to the story, there were multiple of you, decided to tell a reporter that you're questioning that this team has what it takes, your own team has what it takes to win an NBA title, you should have the balls to stand up and stand behind your comments. Tell your teammates that you don't believe in them. Say, hey, it was me. I said this. Put whatever spin you want behind it, but be man enough. Don't be a little wuss. You're a coward. And you know what? Until this story comes out and you find out who actually said it, I look at the Cleveland Cavaliers as the biggest group of cowards that exist in professional sports. It's disgusting. It's disgusting that people would feel that they have the right to disparage their team, disparage their organization, essentially say that they got no confidence in the players that they have on their own team, but get away with it because some whack job reporter feels like they can write a story and say anonymous sources. When is the country going to stand up against this anonymous reporting? Which in most cases is not reporting a story anyway. It's getting people to click. It's getting people to buy newspapers. And you know what? The consumer ends up disappointed because the story never has any legs to it. Once again, you could be at the middle school level and you're told when you're putting a report together and you're writing a paper that you have to cite every single one of your sources. What if you're putting a paper together for high school or college, deciding that, you know what, I'm going to use an anonymous source? People get expelled for that. But writers now get compensated more than they ever have before for writing stories that they don't even need to cite their sources. It's an embarrassment. Shame on the Cleveland Cavaliers. Shame on Chris Barnwell and everybody that reported in his story from ESPN, The Athletic, and CBS. They wasted a lot of people's time that clicked on your little story because you didn't give them anything. The Cavaliers quit on themselves. Source? Maybe it's made up. And you know what? If you are a consumer, if you are a viewer or a reader, and you want to question the truth of these writers that are putting together these stories, you have every right to. You have every right to dispute the fact whether these reporters are telling the truth. Anonymous sources say. I don't care how honest you are as a reporter. When you put anonymous sources in there and you say we don't have to cite the sources that we're using to put together this article or make this report that we're making, your viewers, your readers, and your listeners have every right to doubt you. Every right. So shame on the reporters. And it'll continue to be shame on these reporters until somebody stands up and says, you know what? It isn't the right way to report. And you find some athlete out there with enough balls to stand behind what they say. Until I hear otherwise, the Cavaliers are the biggest group of cowards in professional sports. And by the way, I'll throw this out there too. Since it was The Athletic, ESPN, and CBS Sports, and Cleveland.com, your writers are suspect. Does that mean every single one of them? No. But the ones that contributed to this story are. And I'd start to take their names and cite every time they do a story that's based off of an anonymous source, their credibility is going to go further and further down the tubes. What do you want to be remembered for as a writer? Credibility or the fact that you got the most clicks? Because if you get the most clicks, that might mean that you don't do the work, or the work that you do is being questioned because you decide to put quote-unquote anonymous sources to back up your story. We'll be back with you tomorrow. I told you Nick Lowry, former NFL kicker for the Chiefs and the New York Jets, will be joining the program. Lots of stuff to get into. God bless you. And as always, I'll see you on the other side.